Welcome to another episode of Altitude Advantage. I am your host and team reporter, Elisa Hernandez. And across the table from me, we have our lead writer on DenverBroncos.com, Aric DiLalla. It is Dub Day.
Woo.
We are very excited to be celebrating after a big 38-6 win. The Broncos knocking off the Atlanta Falcons. It was such a great performance. It was actually a really fun game just to watch. The fans, the players, no-fly zone was in attendance. That's why I'm rocking this.
I was going to say, more gear.
More gear. Just all the gear for me.
I literally was just singing that. I was like, oh, I haven't seen that before.
My Broncos closet is
You got
endless.
more gear than I do.
There's
I'm
no
impressed.
way.
Yes, there is a way. There is a way.
There's no way.
But I'm impressed.
So I'm rocking my Super Bowl 50 shirt because the no-fly zone was in attendance, and cornerback Pat Surtain II said that they brought the energy, and so they made sure to translate that on the field. But this performance was really amazing. I really want to start with the defense because, wow, what a show they put on for everyone.
Yeah, and obviously last night and even in Sean Payton's press conference on Monday, a lot of the attention was given to Bo Nix, and he had a great game. We'll talk about him in a second. But I do think you're right. The defense deserves its flowers, too, for what they did. The Falcons' offense came in ranked 5th in the NFL. Kirk Cousins was right up there in terms of quarterbacks and how he was performing. You look at Bijan Robinson. He'd had 5 consecutive games with 100 scrimmage yards. Darnell Mooney and Drake London both had more than 600 yards and 5 touchdowns. Kyle Pitts, obviously a really good player too. So they had weapons. Yeah. And I thought early in this game that we were in for a shootout. Yeah. I said that last night on our instant reaction podcast. But I thought we were in for a shootout when they went right down the field. Some penalties kind of stalled out that drive. They were held to 3 points. But I thought, man, this could be a back and forth game. And then the defense just really settled in. And it wasn't, when you look back at it, there wasn't like, Cody Barton had an interception, obviously. Nick Bonito had a couple of sacks. Jonah Ellis had a sack. But it wasn't the Saints game in terms of, like, huge defensive plays. It wasn't the Raiders game where they're, like, these splash plays, right? It was more just consistent, solid, dominant football where they never let the Falcons get going. And I think Bijan Robinson had 32, 31 yards on the first drive. And then he had
nothing.
30. Yeah, he had 30 yards the rest of the game. And so they really shut him down. Yeah. I thought, even though it wasn't flashy, they made key plays when they needed to. At the end of the half, there was a great example of that. Riley Moss drags down, I think it was Drake London, inbounds as time expires in the first half and saves 3 points there. The Falcons kind of moved it down the field quickly, but that was a great tackle. And it was an example of something that if you didn't watch the game, you're not going to go look back at that and say, 3 plays, 38 yards, end of half. You're not going to know that was a pretty impressive defensive play. But the way that the Broncos, again, buckled down in the red zone when they needed to, and, just didn't let this Falcons team get any life. And it started with the run game. Sean Payton mentioned a couple weeks ago, it's got to start with stopping the run. I mentioned how good Robinson's been, and the Broncos just held him in check the entire game. Looking at it here, 2.9 yards per carry. And then when you get a couple stops and the offense is able to do its job and build you a lead, well, now it's 14-3. Now it's 21-6. And before you know it, the opposition has to move away from what they want to do, which in the Falcons' case is throw the ball quickly, have these quick routes, get it to Robinson out of the backfield. They have to move away from that and start taking shots down the field. And then you have guys like Pat Surtain, who was only targeted once.
Yeah, I saw
twice.
Your tweet. That actually brought me joy when you were like, he's so good. You almost forget that he's out there and how much he's been able to lock down these number one receivers. Yeah,
he spent time covering Mooney and London in this game, did not allow a single catch. And it wasn't, again, from a stat sheet standpoint, you're not going to look at it and be like, oh, Pat Surtain, like, he should be Defensive Player of the Week. But then you look at it and you're like, well, he basically erased whatever guy he wanted to the entire game. So if he's not an All-Pro, I don't know what an All-Pro is. So from his perspective, it was impressive. I mentioned Nick Bonito, another 2 sacks. He's got 9, up to a career high there for him. Jonah Ellis in a game against his brother recorded a sack. Malcolm Roach had a nice dance after his first full sack of the season.
We love the moves. We love the
moves.
moves.
Were great. And I thought Devin Key stepped in. Brandon Jones unable to go. And Key found a way to get it done. And so I think what impressed me most is that they didn't need the splash plays against the Falcons. They were just consistently dominant the whole game, did not allow a touchdown against a top 5 offense in the NFL. I mean, heck of a performance by this Denver defense.
Yeah, and we spoke to inside linebacker Cody Barton earlier today, and he basically said, like, yeah, that's where the focus is in stopping the run, because once you do that, you're able to make a team one-dimensional, and at that point, everything starts flowing. He used the word, that's when the guys can go out and hunt, and that leads to sacks and interceptions, and he had a big interception, which takeaways was something we talked about on the podcast last, where we said, like, they really need to get back to that style of football, and I feel like they really did that on Sunday.
Yeah, and, looking, I think just one takeaway, right? But, and at that point, the game in some ways had already been decided, but I think it still speaks to, if you don't turn the ball over and you get a takeaway, you can turn a somewhat close game, a 2-possession game, into a blowout.
Yeah.
And the Broncos are now 6-1 when forcing a turnover. I believe they're 0-4 when they don't. So it still does feel like a key stat where they need their defense to come up with those big plays. But like you mentioned, how do you get teams in position where they have to take chances down the field? The Chargers, for example, back in week 6, they didn't turn the ball over, but they didn't have to take a ton of chances because
J.K. Dobbins was running all over the place.
He played well, and they got ahead early, and so you can just run the football. You can play you can make these safe throws. If the defense gets early stops, the offense puts it together, and you've got a double-digit lead. Now all of a sudden, I think back to the Raiders game, I think to the Saints game, Panthers, whoever you want to mention, that's when, like you were saying, Cody Barton mentioned, that's when teams have to take chances, and then you get some takeaways and you really pile it on and you make sure that they cannot come back. And it was, when you look at it, the NFC South, Broncos allowed 37 points across 4 games to NFC South opponents, scored 125, but allowing fewer than 10 points a game to a series of opponents, you're going to win a lot of football games doing that.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things you mentioned was about Nick Bonito and the game that he had. After the game, he spoke about the pride that this defense wanted to have in not allowing a touchdown in this game, because that is something that they've talked about. Even PJ Locke said after referring to the Kansas City game last week, he was like, we gave up a touchdown that we didn't want to give up, and it should have came down to a field goal. And so they're like, we really wanted to focus on that this week, and they held the Falcons to just 6 points and no touchdowns. I believe it was the first time that the Falcons were held without a touchdown so far this season. And Nick Bonito, what a day. It's really fun to watch him and Jonathan Cooper kind of have like a brotherly love competition in terms of that. Cooper making a joke like, man, this guy's trying to show me up. And Bonito's like, I know you're coming, so I need to get as far ahead as possible on the stat sheet. And like you said, it was his 4th career multi-sack performance, a new career high for him, like you mentioned, and it's tied for the 2nd most quarterback takedowns in the league. And this Broncos team has just been rolling, recording 39 sacks, which is tied for the 2nd most by the club through 11 games. It's just one of those things, like they said, they want to get back to their style of football. And it's easier said when, head coach Sean Payton mentioned, like, in the future, we need to stop the run. Our defense needs to get in, our running game needs to get going. It's easy to say those things. But when you actually see that translate onto the field and go into the offense now a little bit, when you literally watch the power of friendship, push, Javonte Williams into the end zone. That is the definition of a team-driven, touchdown. Yeah,
this offense obviously was at their best this week. Javonte Williams ran the ball well. It was almost like he saw Audric Estime run it well last week and said, okay, this week is my turn to run the ball well. He ran it hard. Also made some plays, through the air. So I was impressed with Javonte Williams. They rotated through a lot of backs. 6 different guys got carries. Javonte had 9. He led the team in carries, but really spread throughout the entire team. You had young skill position players, whether it was Devon Vele, Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin. All those guys made big plays. And then, of course, Bo was just spectacular, right? And I talked about it last night, just in terms of some of the stats. And so I won't go, over everything he did, because it does feel like
there was a lot that he accomplished last night.
Oh my gosh. Every, like it's like first rookie to do this, first Broncos quarterback to do this, 3rd Broncos quarterback to ever do this.
Yeah.
Like, it was impressive. And 28 of 33, 307 yards, 4 touchdowns, 145 rating, better than 80% completion percentage. So he was really good. And I think what I took away from Sean Payton's press conference on Monday was that Bo continues to take strides. And Sean Payton said there's not one game where you look up and a guy's gotten it, but you see gradual progress each week. And he said, yeah, maybe there were some throws that in the past he wouldn't have made, and now he has the confidence to make those throws. Certainly the play down the middle of the field to Devon Vele at the end of the first half. I thought that was a big-time drive in terms of the Falcons have just cut it to 14-6. They get the ball after halftime. If you go 3 and out there, it's still a ball game. And instead, the Broncos go down, score a touchdown. They get a 3 and out. Boom, they score again. And it's like it's exactly what happened to Denver in Baltimore a couple of weeks ago. But this time the Broncos were the one doing it, and they said this game's over. We're slamming the door shut. But that throw, when you look at the all 22, the end zone view, or kind of the high camera angle, it's like, man, where is that ball? Especially the end zone view. It's like, how did he get that ball past the outstretched arms of multiple defenders? And it just speaks to what he's been doing. Obviously, if you look at his season-long performance, especially over the last 5 or 6 weeks, it stacks up there with anybody. Certainly would think he'd be offensive rookie of the week. We'll see. Is he AFC Offensive Player of the Week? We'll have to
give him the Hemi Award. That's
what you're. Okay, the Hemi. Yeah,
he's up for the Hemi. Pat Surtain won one.
He's up for the Hemi. He's also up for FedEx Air Player of the Week. You can go vote for that. There's a lot of things to vote for this week, but I'm just impressed that he continues to do it, and in a way that his ceiling. At least one of the things Sean Payton says was that like the media is seeing this as it's happening, and so they're kind of reacting with everybody. But it's like, where is his ceiling? And each week that you think, okay, well maybe that's the best we're going to see from Bo. Each week he does a little bit better, and I think especially nationally, people are starting to pay attention. You saw after the game, people are like, this is a Rookie of the Year type player.
Yeah.
He's been outperforming Jaden Daniels statistically over the last several weeks. So another wonderful performance from Bo, and I think the two things that matter the most, and listen, the stats are great. I want him to win Rookie of the Week. I want him to win AFC Offensive Player of the Week. I want him to win the Hemi.
You sound like PJ Locke. After the game, he was like, I want him to win Offensive Rookie again.
Yeah, exactly. He wants him to win it again. So those things are cool. And, like, obviously, when you throw for 4 touchdowns, 300 yards, it's fun. It's you saw him standing there on the sideline. He's, like, grinning ear to ear. You can tell he's having a good time out there. But the two things that are most important is, one, the win, right? And Sean Payton mentioned that. He said Bo would be the first person to tell you that winning is the most important things. And the Broncos have now done that 6 times this year, 6-5, sitting in a really good position. And the other thing is, I think the belief that the rest of the team gets from Bo playing like that. And Sean mentioned way back in training camp that when the quarterback position is not settled, it can create a ceiling for a team, because guys know you can only go so far when you don't have your quarterback. And he said that, listen, when you have that figured out, it means a lot. It's pretty powerful for that team. He said when he was in New Orleans with Drew Brees, that was the case, obviously. You never felt like you were out of any game. You always felt like you could come back because of the guy you had under center. Right. And certainly performances like yesterday, you don't want to make any sweeping proclamations, but performances like yesterday make you feel like Bo can be that guy. And so just continue to see him develop. Sean did say, listen, let's not send him to Canton, Ohio yet. Put him in the Hall of Fame quite yet.
He sounds like you. Relax.
Exactly.
Relax.
Like it still is. You can't say it's one game with a bad performance if you don't say it's one game with a great one. But I do think the trend has been encouraging. Sean Payton has said he likes the way he prepares. He likes his leadership. But there are still things to correct, and I think Bo would be the first one to tell you that. And so that's encouraging as well, that as you keep moving forward with this season, there's places where Bo Nix wants to get better. But, man, what a performance. And you're right, it was fun. The Broncos' biggest home win since 2014, biggest home win since I've worked here, which is back in 2016. I mean, you look up, and the other thing is that it felt like it didn't feel like you were needing a bunch of takeaways to get there. Like the Broncos against the Raiders had a couple of short fields, and they took advantage and scored a bunch of points. Yeah. But it was like, this was just I think Raheem Morris said it in his press conference, like they just kind of kicked our butts. And that's what it felt like, that the Broncos just kind of went out there and took care of business. And you look up and you're like, oh, they won by 32. Mm-hmm. Dang.
Yeah, it's one of those things that when I was watching some of the highlights last night, some of just like the passes that he was doing, you can see the confidence. Like he had a couple side passes that kind of just like, little flashiness that he kind of showed there. And it's funny because they actually asked Troy Franklin after the game, like, the touchdown that Marvin Mims scored, was that the same play that you scored on? And Troy was like, no, it's not the same play. But he's like, look, like that Oregon connection, like it's something that we've just been practicing, and it's something that we're going to continue to grow from. And what I like about this team is the fact that everyone is just willing to do their part, because I think the culture is the win is what matters. And whether you're a veteran like Cortland Sutton or you're a rookie like Troy Franklin, everyone's like, I'm just going to wait my turn and I'm just going to wait till my number is called so that I can go produce on the field. And I think that is really a winning formula for this team because you do have a lot of really great players that can make a big play at any time. And Cody Barton had said that after the win in New Orleans, where he said the good thing about this defense and this team in general is like it can be anyone's day. And I think that's one of the things that you really kind of look into as this team continues to grow and you get a big win like this in front of Broncos country, which I know was really important to this team. And PJ Locke spoke about that, we were tired of hearing we almost had it. He's like, no, this was the week that we wanted to go get it. And I think they took a lot of pride in shutting out the Falcons in the second half. And they took a lot of pride in having that defense perform that way, which I think frees up the offense a little more to kind of play a little more free.
Yeah, you don't need your offense to be perfect when your defense is playing this way. You also don't need your defense to be perfect when your offense is playing this way, right? And so I think what stands out to me is this is a team now that is 6-5. Mm-hmm. They still hold the 7 seed in the AFC wild card race. They are going to play a division rival this week, which is never easy. Mm-hmm. But you now look at it and you've got a Raiders team that is struggling a little bit. You've got a Cleveland Browns team whose starting quarterback is lost for the season and is has faced its share of challenges. And then a Colts team that got a win against the Jets, but had also lost several in a row. And so you've got 2 home games and you've got a division rival on the road that is struggling. You have an opportunity here to really do something. And it kind of set up this way, even with the Baltimore and Kansas City losses, that if you could find a way to win this one against Atlanta, you're going to put yourself in a position where can you go take care of business and really, we've heard Pat Surtain talk about it before, like the nameless, faceless opponent. Can you just do what you need to do each week and, put in the work during the week, then go out and play clean, physical? I mean, that's the identity of this team, right, is physical. Yeah. Can you go out there and do that, take care of business, and find a way to get a couple more wins and enter the last part of the season with a real chance to make the postseason for the first time since 2015. It feels like, and Sean Payton has said it time and time again, this team feels different than a year ago when they were 6-5 and then 7-6, and each time failed to win that next game to get back to 2 games over 500 and kind of finish what they started in terms of coming back from 1-5. The Broncos had a little bit more leeway this year. They were 5-3. They didn't have to climb out of that huge hole of being 1-5. Obviously, 0-2 still impressive to get out of that, but that feels like forever ago that they were 0-2. And this team, the way that Bo Nix is playing, continuing to get better each week, the way the defense is playing, holding really good offenses in check. And special teams, Sean Payton mentioned Marvin Mims getting going in the return game. We saw that against the Falcons. So it does feel like at the right time, everything is starting to click a little bit. And don't get me wrong, this is the NFL. So any week, anybody can beat you, and you've got to be locked in. And if you overlook a team, even, the Raiders are struggling, they're still a division rival. And if you overlook them, you're not ready to go in Vegas on Sunday, like they can and will beat you. And so we'll talk more about that Thursday, but the Broncos still have to be locked in. I do think when you've got this group of young players, but the right veterans in place, and a coach like Sean Payton, I think you're going to stay locked in. And we haven't really seen the Broncos have a quote-unquote flat performance where it wasn't up to their standard. And so hopefully that continues. But, it's starting to feel a little bit real in terms of what this team can accomplish. I said a few weeks ago that this game against the Falcons felt like a real turning point of sorts where if you win the game, it's a step toward kind of what you want to accomplish this season. It's getting back on track. It's pushing those one close loss away, and it's turning your attention toward this final stretch. If you lose, now you're dealing with a 3-game losing streak. You've gone from 5-3 to 5-6. You've got an uphill battle now to get back to where you want to go. Yeah. And so
it's a different conversation you're having.
It's completely different. And it's interesting because it's just the fact that you won 38-6. In retrospect, you're like, oh yeah, we won this game easily. But I think going into it, it had the feeling like we need to come out at our best to win this football game. Yeah. And clearly when the Broncos are at their best, they can be really good because that Falcons team has beaten people this year. I know they're dealing with some injuries, but they beat the Eagles. They pushed the Chiefs to the limit. And, the Broncos went out there and took care of business handedly. And it wasn't even the Raiders game, the Broncos came back and won, but they were down 10-0. And if it's not for that Surtain pick six, you're looking at a 17-3 or whatever it was. It would have been 17-3 deficit, and it could have been a different game. This game was never in that kind of danger. It was just from the start, all Broncos. And I think if you're someone on this team, you see your quarterback playing the way he is, the defense playing the way they are, you got to feel pretty good about going into this final stretch.
Well, I feel like you felt that energy after the Kansas City loss. When we spoke to Adam Troutman, he had mentioned we talked to a lot of the guys, and it didn't feel like they were down and out. And I think that was one of the things that a lot of, Broncos country had questions about, like, how do you bounce back from a loss like the Chiefs? Because you could come out more on the emotional side and things like that. But they were really focused on, no, we need to come out and be aggressive and show the league like we are the real deal and they can do these things. And PJ Locke mentioned that as well. It was an added motivation to not come out flat and not come out emotional, but come out focused, like you said, aggressive, physical, which I remember week one, we were like, what is the identity of this team? And it has very quickly formed. All these rookies have grown up in front of our eyes, and a lot of the veteran guys are saying, like, there's no more rookies on this team. We're 11 weeks in, and I think they are locked in onto the process. And Quinn Minor said, like, we're all committed to the process of getting better every week.
Yeah, and I can't wait to watch it, because now I think you've seen them go toe-to-toe with the Chiefs. You've seen them blow out a Falcons team that's was leading the NFC South. And so now it's like, well, can they stack performances like this? And can they, string some wins together? Can they go to Vegas? And they should go to Vegas. They'll be favored. They should win this football game. Yep. Can they go there and just take care of business and make it routine? Because I think good football teams, playoff football teams, go and take care of business in this situation. And like I said, we'll talk more about it Thursday, but this is exciting to see what this team can become and what the rest of this year holds. And I think this year it was exciting from the beginning because you got to see what you had in Bo Nix, but quickly
they grow up
so fast. The expectations have changed, and now it's like, okay, Broncos country, let's buckle up here, because if the Broncos can keep this going, we got a real chance of making it back to the postseason.
Yeah, and that's the goal. I think that's the thing that's on everyone's mind, and the players but they're staying locked in. They're not letting the moment get too big for themselves. And I think that's one of the biggest things that you can kind of take from this team. Like, they're locked in, they're focused. Like you said, it's the next opponent. And that's what we got our eyes on, because to get to where we need to be, especially right now, as you mentioned, it is about the next opponent and the one after that and the one after that, but 1 week at a time. Well, that is it for this episode of Altitude Advantage. Once again, I am your host and team reporter, Elisa Hernandez. We have our coach, our film study coach, lead writer on DenverBroncos.com, Aric DiLalla, who needs to go to the team store very soon.
Where's Susanna? She was supposed to swag surf.
She was supposed to swag surf, but it's fine.
Interesting.
It's fine. But make sure you guys comment, subscribe, all those things. We'll make sure you read those comments on Thursday. That's going to be a fun read on the comments this week. So
can't wait.
Do not disappoint Broncos country.